All right. We are here. I guess I'll record this for YouTube. So anybody that's here, say hi to YouTube for me. I'm going to be making content that we can upload on YouTube a lot more often. I think it's going to be the start of that. So I think since there's not a ton of Smite 1 people left, I'll cut this down so you guys get to hear J. Cole in the background and not kind of over me. But since there's not a ton of like Smite 1 people left, I feel like there's a big like missing chunk of content that we would usually have for Smite 1. I'm going to try and fill some of that void. And what's Smite 1 exactly, Juan? Exactly. Dude, I should actually put chat on the screen. Can I get my chat display? Wait a minute. I should be able to put chat somewhere. Okay, wait a minute. Add existing. Does this do it? Okay. Someone just try typing. Oh fuck! Wait, no, it works. Okay. Okay, it should be connected to chat, so that way the chat will be in the YouTube video. So, and let me just, I'm gonna put hee. There we go. Blame Stu. Yep. Okay, well, it's gonna be in the video. I do indeed blame Stu. Okay, where? All right, so I ordered these basically alphabetically. There's a couple that are not alphabetical order because I feel like they're interesting to talk about later. But for the most part, we're going to be going down alphabetical order. This list is strictly my opinion. So if you guys have an opinion, it's probably wrong. But if you want to make a case for it, obviously in the comments or in the chat, please, feel free to make that case. I feel like, opinions are definitely, worth discussing for sure. So first, let's talk about Aphrodite. Aphrodite just recently got buffed. This character is Giga Broken. That's why she's going to go to S tier. This character has lane pressure, she has sustain, she has healing, she has counter dive, she can initiate, she has a range stun, damage increase. The only thing she doesn't have is objective shred. This character is objectively broken. If you have not been playing this character since she got buffed, just play her. I'm about to take it to heart and hold it against you forever. Listen, speaking of taking it to heart, man, this character takes so many people's hearts and stuff. So, but no, this character is actually absolutely just dog meat broken. Play her if you want a Mickey win. If you care about winning, this character shuts down a lot of the good picks in the meta right now as well. We'll talk about some of our counter matchups and like how to counter this character later, after the S tier's kind of been defined, because you're going to see a recurring theme with the S tier. Next is Ares. I feel like Ares is a solid B tier. He has some good matchups and some really bad matchups. He shuts down a lot of things that some comps want to do. I feel like you're strictly picking this character in your bottom 2 in comp to try and counterpick a draft that's happening in the top 3. Yes, he has beads burning pressure, but there's other picks in the meta that do that slightly better. So I don't see a lot of value in this character right now in the meta. And this is coming from someone that loves Ares. I love this character. I think he's actually criminally underpicked right now. I feel like auras are very, very good, which means he should be very, very good. But I feel like a lot of the same issues he's always had. If he engages and they have a decent counter engage, he just dies. More so now than Sobek because they keep buffing Sobek. So I feel like B tier is a very solid place for him. I don't think that's going to be too controversial or anything like that. I feel like most people would agree with that placement. Next is Ardeo. Ardeo is going to be in the same tier as Ares. I feel like she brings a lot of lockdown, a lot of brawling. She doesn't peel very, very well, but she is a really good initiation tank. If you want to go like Blink Sprout on this character or Blink Thorns on this character, I feel like that's completely valid. Athena might be worse than Bucky, not gonna lie. We'll talk about Athena, I promise you. But Ardeo has a big AoE cripple, and there are some comps that don't handle cripples very well at all. There's not a lot of places in the game to get a good cripple in your kit either. King Arthur namely has one, Ardeo has one, obviously, are the two characters that come to mind immediately. But Ares, I guess, since she's right next to Ares. Big cripples, they stop a lot of the same picks. Except Ares brings a little bit more beads burn, but Ares is a lot less survivable than Ardeo. So I think they're very comparable. You're probably playing them in similar situations. Both probably are strictly counter picks. Athena is going to be my first D tier support, I think, for this list. I had a good discussion with some really solid players earlier today about Athena's value. Athena is very, very easy to pick up. She's very one note. She's very one-dimensional. You want to get a good taunt off for your engagement, and then she has like a relatively simple kit outside of that as well. But here's my issue with Athena. So Athena is again very one-dimensional, so it's very easy for the enemy to predict what she's going to do. If Athena's around a corner, what's the first thing that's going to happen to me? I'm going to get taunted. If Athena's dashing at me, what's the first thing she's going to do? She's gonna taunt me. You know what I mean? And after that taunt's down, if you have 40% CDR, you probably have about 8 seconds left that you're just not able to do anything except ult the person that you think is their dive target. She also has global pressure for side lanes, but she doesn't pressure duo lane right now at all. So realistically, you're locking in a losing pressure pick in duo lane, hoping that your ADC carries you pressure-wise. And in the meta right now, you're going to see a lot of picks that don't let her do that. Aphrodite, namely, is one of them. She's the one that's on the tier list right now, so we'll talk about the Aphrodite-Athena matchup. If you're playing Athena and Aphrodite, you're never killing anybody. The duo lane 2v2 is very, very bad if you get your first buffs invaded by any decently neutral pressure support or a high pressure support. Then you don't get the value of having global pressure. And you might be saying, okay, well, just send your jungler over to duo side, play off the taunt, and get a good gank off. If the jungler is playing duo side, that means the solo laner is getting camped or ganked. Your solo laner will be losing neutrals, and if you're losing solo lane neutrals, the solo lane doesn't have priority for BDK. BDK and Tikis are an infinitely more important side of the map to start playing for a jungler. So if you're locking in a support that does not help you dominate a duo lane 2v2, and you're saying, oh, as long as my jungler comes, we win the game, you shouldn't be expecting your jungler to be over in duo lane right now. It's basically what I'm saying. And because Athena needs help to pressure, she needs a high pressure ADC, she needs a high pressure jungler, where she is a relatively low pressure support. I feel like she's one of those worst supports in the game right now. A high pressure support, talking about bad counter matchups into Athena, Bacchus. Bacchus is a very high-pressure duo lane pick. He engages very, very well, very one-dimensional. You want to flop or you want to stun and then do the one thing you didn't do before that ability and do it after that ability. He has a really good teamfight ultimate. The only thing he's lacking in is peel, and a lot of the supports you're going to see put higher on this list deal with Bacchus very, very well. But in lane, he is a lane bully. He gets you a lot of pressure. He has a lot of CC for your comp, so in your mid lane 3v3 and your duo 2v2, and that BDK possible 4v4, he's actually very, very valuable at those points in the game. He doesn't do anything particularly bad. He has a couple bad matchups into some of the more meta picks, not particularly in support, just in the meta in general. Silences can counter him. He has a channeled ability that has a lot of value in it as well. Things like Amaterasu, things like Shock Ultimate on an engage, things like Karen 1, and Karen's not very, very good, but just as an example, can put a stop to him very, very easily. Also the picks like Terra that want people to be diving into Terra. He can't knock her up. She can press forward, then he'll die on the counter engage. So he does have some really bad matchups in the meta right now, but he is overall a very, very solid duo lane 2v2, mid lane 3v3, and even solo side 4v4 kind of support. If you can get a good lead with Bacchus, he's never going to feel bad. Next is Baron Samedi. Baron Samedi is strictly a counter pick. At least in my opinion. I think this character is insanely fun, and he does have room for him. This list is primarily geared towards competitive. So in a competitive setting, I do feel like Baron has a lot of pressure. And the thing is, like, again, he has that sustain. He has a decent amount of poke. He gives the team access to Baron's Brew, which is really, really fun. His Hysteria passive is very, very good. And there's a lot of backliners and frontliners that don't deal with the vortex of his ultimate very, very well. So let's say you have an Ares, as an example, who's rated higher on this list. If Ares steps up into Baron, Ares is dead. Artio can get away from him, but these two just have better matchups. Again, if Bacchus flops in, Bacchus can't get away from the Baron. Aphrodite, he's one of the better counter picks in Aphrodite. Like, I'm not saying he's S tier, but like just put him side by side for a second. Aphrodite has no way to get away from Baron except her ultimate. He's actually a very, very good counter pick into Aphrodite as well. He matches the pressure in the dual lane very, very well and keeps giving the ADC similar amounts of sustain in the early game. Just not an overall good pick like Aphrodite is. But if you are looking into countering picks with Baron, you'd be looking to counter picks like Aphrodite, Yamoja, Khepri. You're going to see a very popular theme in this S tier later. Those characters I just named might all be up here. So keep an eye on this character as a counter pick in C tier. Kabrakan. Also, I'm going to say he's a little bit more of a counter pick, but he also brings a lot of lane pressure. He has a little bit more lane pressure than Baron, so I want to put him in a slightly higher tier. But Kabrakan can end up countering Artio. He can end up countering Ares. He ends up countering a lot of the ADCs. So a lot of the big value you want to see on these supports is not like the support to support matchup. It's more of like the support to something else in the matchup. So when we talk about characters like Kabrakan, he's very good into ADCs like Hachi, Ishtar, even Charybdis. He can be pretty decent into it. It's more of a like a neutral matchup. But Kabrakan does have a very, very bad matchup into realistically any ADC except minus maybe Dawn Zaburo. Dawn Zaburo can kind of fry him a little bit, but if they're picking Dawn Zaburo, then maybe you've won the draft already. But the character immediately has lane pressure. He has good mitigation. He can be a good objective like face checker, and he has walls. Walls are imperative in this meta, at least in my opinion. I think if you can end up sectioning off a team fight and making someone uncomfortable, forcing them to go into Phantom Shell, I think is very, very valuable. I like Kabrakan a lot right now. He feels good in a Terra as well. Yeah, I completely agree. Terra doesn't have a really good way to deal with him except like clapping him on wave, and that means your ADC is not the one getting clapped. He doesn't really care about her root or anything like that by breaking her obelisk. So I think that's actually very, very fair. Next is Cerberus. Cerberus is an interesting character. This is not his official placement yet. So this character has role flexibility, which does aid him in this meta. This is strictly talking about him being played in support. And as a support, I do think he struggles. I think he struggles a lot. I think there are several picks in the B tier I would rather be playing than Cerberus in support for several reasons, and we'll talk about that here. So Cerberus has a lot of magical prot shred. He has a lot of early game damage. He has a CC immunity burning ultimate, so he can end up getting those beads. He can end up getting those CC immune ultimates by pressing 4. But a lot of the characters in the game right now that are very, very good either have a way to be knock up immune by his ultimate, they have a good way to lock him down, or they simply just don't care that he exists. So Cerberus can be this lane pressure bully into a lot of matchups, but into the best matchups, that really doesn't do anything. He either trades net neutral with them in pressure, or that pressure doesn't end up mattering in the long run. And in a late game scenario, some players will feel obligated to go blink on this character, and they feel like they can't really do anything unless you're blink Cerberus ulting and then leaping back to your team. And that puts him in the same issue of having a one-note engage just like Athena, which is very easy to counterplay. He's really, really good in solo. He has some bad matchups in solo, but if you take those out, I think he's an infinitely better solo laner. He needs to be a damage threat for a backliner, at least in my opinion. And in this current meta, I feel like if your support isn't peeling for your backline, the jungler and solo laner will kill them very, very quickly. And Cerberus is a make-up for the damage like that you're losing if you lose a backliner's life. Instead, I think you'd be rather like picking someone that either locks down a frontliner, which he doesn't do very, very well yet, or just pick something that keeps people alive. So I don't think he's inherently bad in support. I think he's definitely playable. I do think he's a little bit weaker, and I don't think, at least if I was the one looking at this character, he doesn't provide what I would like to provide to a team. In my eyes, Cerb is a momentum character. If your team is planning on outpacing, he can definitely snowball, and I think if you're snowballing, I think there are better characters to snowball with than Cerberus. I feel like any of the characters above him, if you lock in these characters above him in B, A, or S tier, you would have won the game anyway. I think you made the game harder on yourself by locking in Cerberus instead of locking in any of these picks. I think if you're planning to snowball a game, like if you want just dummy pressure, Bok is an infinitely better option. And I think in that same vein, Ares counters more things that can get locked in and also brings a similar amount of pressure that Cerberus brings. And you get objective burn with Ares, which is always really nice. Cthulhu. Cthulhu is a very interesting pick. I've actually played this in competitive this season already, which is actually very, very fun. This is a pick that should always primarily be going to your solo laner if it is available. But there is a world where you end up taking this if you don't want the enemy team to have it. So if in solo lane, and just a brief overview, there are a lot of good characters right now. Shock, Amaterasu, Cerberus, I guess is still very, very good as well. Cthulhu, those characters are Cucullin. Those characters are all like very, very good. And if your team ends up taking one, let's say your first pick, and then the enemy team takes 2 picks that are not a solo laner because they assume they're going to get Cthulhu in the third pick, you could get Amaterasu and Cthulhu on the same team to deny it from the enemy team. And this pick is actually not bad from a support standpoint. He just doesn't do a ton of things. Again, he doesn't peel very, very well. He brings a lot of lane pressure, but that's not exactly what you need out of a support, at least right now in my opinion. You're definitely also aiming to snowball a match if you're going for this pick. If you end up getting even neutral or behind, this pick feels very, very rough from support. But in the early game, this thing can burn a ton of beads, put a ton of pressure on the ADC and the support, and give you a lot of priority on the side of the map. Again, though, you're not playing the side of the map like on a jungle standpoint right now. You're playing more solo side for BDKs and that neutral farm, and maybe their Tikis as well. So maybe in a different life, in a different meta, this pick might be a little bit better. But definitely don't sleep on it. If there's ever a time where you can end up taking a top solo laner and you know the enemy team will not pick a solo laner until their third pick because they are, you already got yours and they don't feel like they're at risk of losing Cthulhu, you can always whip this out randomly in support, and then you've taken away the best solo lane option that they have. Next, Fafnir. Fafnir is probably A tier. I feel like Fafnir brings a lot of CC. Some people look at this character like, oh, he does nothing. This character burns objectives. He has 3 stuns. Realistically speaking, he has his 1 on his dwarf form that stuns, his 1 on his 2 form also stuns, and his leap in his dragon form also stuns. So, and his 2 burns objectives very, very well. He can slot in a damage item being demonic ring, and then just end up like soloing backliners himself. Again, I feel like he has an issue where he can be very easy to walk past if you're playing the dragon, and if he gets behind, it can feel very bad. But he has a lot of decent matchups. I think all of these matchups under him struggle into Fafnir, or like they kind of struggle to deal with Fafnir. Maybe Baron can deal with them a little bit better if the Baron player is very, very good. But he handles Kabrakan very well. He handles Ardio very well if he sells his ultimate up. He handles Ares extremely well because he just either de-transform or transform when the Ares is ulting. And if you go Absolution, your team's really they're not at risk at all. He's really decent. It just takes a very specific play style for you and your team to make it work. Not saying he's odd or weird or even hard to make work. It just means that you're drafting for a very specific idea. And if the enemy team realizes that you're drafting for a very specific idea, they can end up counter drafting you. So, Demonic Grip plus his 1 in Dragon is like a 70% magic pen. Yeah, it's actually fucking ridiculous. So... And I feel like that dive alone, like he doesn't need anyone to help him dive either. The issue that I had with Cerberus was that we said Cerberus can't make up for the damage if he's diving by himself. Cerberus is not a big enough dive threat. Fafnir does not have that. That's not the case with Fafnir. Fafnir, if Fafnir ends up getting onto an ADC or a mid laner or a jungler without beads, and they're squishy, done on a building hybrid or something like that, Fafnir will end up killing them. Cerberus by himself does not do that, but Fafnir actually ends up doing that. So I feel like that alone is like they feel very similar roles. Cerberus has a little bit more early pressure in lane, possibly. But even then, like if you're lucky in Cerberus, Fafnir has a really good matchup in Cerberus because he just hammers his 2. He can leap away if he gets ulted. Like, actually, yeah, like I'm actually probably miserable locking in Cerberus into Fafnir. So I think that's just a very, very good example. You can also point blank, stun, exactly. So next we have Ganesha. Ganesha is a fundamentally broken character. A lot of players, so this is from a competitive standpoint. This is not from a ranked standpoint. This is not from anything. So like if you're locking in that character in ranked, you might be walking around waiting for your team to do something. But in a team game where you have comms with your team, this character does it all. This character is a peel support. He can be an engage support. He can be an objective burn support. He can lock down anything that dives except maybe some auto attackers. This character does everything that you would need. He has a range engage. He has a protection shred on his cage as well. It also slows. He has a protection boosting silence. If the enemy gets hit by that and they still continue to dive past and your backline is in your silence, has a 115 protection swing. That all is applied basically instantly, by the way. So just out of like raw stats, this character is very, very ridiculous. And sheer utility of this character is ridiculous. And this character is very, very easy to slot into most drafts. You can end up top 3ing this character and it doesn't reveal what you're trying to do. You can end up bottom 2ing this character if the draft looks really good for him, and again, he'll just pop off. I play this pick a lot personally. It's one of the picks that I'm regrettably known for. I think I'm 0-4 and like 38 or something in it with AGL right now in the last couple weeks. And that's all of my games combined. So, like this pick just does everything you need on a support. So if you have not been playing Ganesha, and you've been getting dove by, like, let's say a Cthulhu or a Shock or an Amaterasu or Lancelot, look at this pick. Also for Lancelot, he has a stun in his dash, so you just dash Lancelot off his horse and silence him and he can't do anything about it. He has really good matchups into a lot of the top meta picks right now, not even just in support, but in solo, jungle, mid, and ADC as well. So this character just kind of does everything you need for him to do right now. So if you haven't been playing this character, look to play him for sure. Let's look. Geb. Oh man, he might be Bakukujiro tier, I'm not gonna lie. I kind of hate Geb. I feel like Geb he has a similar issue with Athena. So like, while Athena is a very one-note engage support, Geb's a very one-note peel support. So let's see, out of the peel supports of Ganesha, Khepri, Kumbhakarna, Ganesha, Khepri, Kumbhakarna, and Geb, I guess. Let's give you guys 4 options. Geb is the option. Out of those 4, I'd be locking in. I actually wouldn't even lock him in. The other 3 I'd be locking in like very specific scenarios, or even sometimes blindly. But like, I'm never locking in Geb, even if they have a Mercury, even if they have crit, even if they have 2 people building crit, the passive doesn't do anything. This character has a very telegraphed way to peel. He has to play for like a knockup, which again, a lot of things in the meta right now are knockup immune. He has an ultimate that does a decent chunk of damage actually, and if you want to use it to engage, you're playing Blink Geb at that point, so you don't have 2 peel relics. The health shield can be nice. It also cleanses CC. And I feel like any team that doesn't play around the shield very well will find it hard to play into Geb. But as I said, I feel like most teams that I play against know how to play into Geb being on the team. He loses duo lane 2v2. He doesn't give you pressure. He doesn't rotate very well either. He's actually very pickable in team fights. He has his winding up rollout that has CC immunity on it to a point, but he doesn't have an escape basically in a team fight. Same issue with Athena. If you don't want the Athena to get out, she's never going to get out. Same thing with Geb. If you don't want the Geb to live, the Geb is not going to live. So I feel like he has a lot of the same issues as Athena. Too easy to predict. Doesn't bring enough value in the pre-level 5 duo laning phase either. Doesn't really get a lot of stuff done. And in the late game, let's say you get to late game, he doesn't bring a ton of value compared to a lot of the other picks above him. So Horus is probably gonna be B tier. Horus is probably maybe he's the best warrior support right now. It's just the magical ADCs are not very plentiful right now, and he doesn't peel insanely well. He has a ton of lane pressure. He's just a pressure bot in duo lane for a while, and if you have a really good mid 3v3, again, he can be super lethal to play into. But he has 2 ways to, like, he has a dash to engage, he has a knockup, and he has a leap dash. I think it's another dash to get out. That has a lot of healing, gives you some protections in the back line, and his ultimate's very hit or miss. If teams can play around the ultimate, he's a very good character. If not, he drops significantly in value. I value this character a lot in competitive right now. I think he brings a lot of good things to a team. But not every team can play around his ultimate, like, together as a team. He's very easy to shut down in lane if you know exactly what to lock in against him. And also, if you know a team is prioritizing Horus, you can hold your support pick and you can end up going Ares in like the bottom 2. And Horus feels insanely worse, like a lot worse into Ares. Same thing into Ardio. Same thing into Kabrakan. Same thing into Fafnir, same thing into Bacchus. Literally all of the picks above him make him super miserable. The hardest counter pick to him is Ares, but Artie is a very decent one as well. Next, Eset. I'll put Eset at B tier. Eset has been nerfed significantly out of the support role over the years, over the last couple seasons. This character has a 30% damage mitigating big AoE field that can bring some health back. She has a slow that's, I think, up to 35%. Also provides some shielding for for allies nearby. She has a ranged stun, and she has her one that's basically useless, but it can give you some early pressure in lane. So her pre-level 5 lane isn't bad. Her team fight's actually also not bad, but the biggest issue is that she's a mage, and a mage build doesn't feel fantastic. A mage support builds don't feel fantastic right now. The only mage that gets around this is Aphrodite, because Aphrodite has so much healing, so much sustain, that even if she gets poked, she just heals back. So if Aphrodite feels like she has Guardian stats is basically the biggest thing. She also shares protections with their backline. The best build you could probably go for Eset is maybe a Prophetic Thebes build, and that takes a while to ramp up, and you don't want that into a lot of the picks that you could be facing in this meta. So while I do think she's viable, I do think she does something very similar to a lot of the S tier supports of what you're going to be seeing them do, which is just shut down a lot of the dive. She counter dives very well, or at least stops a dive. I feel like she just doesn't do enough right now. I feel like the nerfs have kind of gotten to her. Her 3 is not nearly as good as it's not as good as it should be for support to be giving shielding and slowing and prot shred like that. But on paper, her kit's solid. It's just so hard. It's just so hard for her. If the one had any type of CC, it'd be so good. If her one slowed, she'd be phenomenal. So it can if you build Gem of Iso. That's so real. So yeah, like I mean, I guess that is true. I guess if you do build Gem of Iso, it stacks to 3. Her one is now a CC tool. Like again, like she's not bad. She is knockup immune in that. Again, like I don't think she's a bad character. I do love ESET support, but I feel like she would need some buffs if she wanted to compete with anything above her. Next is Khepri. Khepri is S tier. I don't think anyone's really going to argue against this. Needs to be scrimmed clearly. We scrimmed it. Now we jump Iso, but we did scrim ESET. I think I went 0-9 in like 20. I died on cooldown, but my team didn't. So maybe I did my job. Maybe it does need to be scrimmed more. Question mark. So, but yeah, Khepri is absolutely busted. So I didn't include Aphrodite in the peel supports, but basically, Khepri is the character where you look at the enemy team and you say, oh, like, do they have one big dive threat, which is like a jungler usually. As in, does their solo laner kill my backline by himself? No? Okay, I can lock in Khepri. A lot of solo laners are really good in the meta right now. Don't do that. So, Shock, namely, is one. Will not kill a backliner by themselves very quickly. Same thing with Kokolin. You can shut down that dive very easily. But junglers like Lancelot, Camazotz, Robin, those junglers get a lot of value into like picks like Ganesha, where they just want to burst down one person. Well, Khepri just prevents that from ever happening. If you commit a ton of damage on a one person, Khepri presses 4 and negates all of the resources that you just dumped into that person. Because it doesn't matter what HP they're being revived at, the fact that they are still alive and you had to burn maybe 2 ultimates, 3 ultimates and a relic just to not kill somebody. Like, if that happened with any other character in the game, you would say, hey, are we trolling? Because we just dumped 3 things on this person and they're not dead yet. This character is fundamentally broken as well. He's been busted for months. People just finally came around to it. He has a protection shred on his 2, a damage mitigation on his 2. He has a 50 protection pluck. So if he's plucking and engaging, which is a weakness that Athena has, by the way, if Athena dashes and taunts, she's still Athena. But if Khepri like roots and plucks you, Khepri is infinitely tanky, and he can also just cancel it and revive himself if you ever collapse on top of him. Athena can't do that. If you look at both of here, like side by side, you have Athena, you have Khepri. If you look at both of these characters, they do something very similar, except Khepri does infinitely more. And if Khepri engages, he can actually still help his team. Athena can't do anything. So if you pluck somebody as Khepri, you're definitely living. If you taunt somebody as Athena, it's a toss up. And then again, Athena ult onto a dive target versus Khepri ult onto a dive target. One of those are going to be infinitely like harder to deal with. Couple that with Khepri having protection shred for objectives and for team fights, and damage mitigation for team fights. And he has a lot of CC in his kit. This character is super strong. His weakest point in the game is his early laning phase. But he doesn't just give up pressure. He's not like a wimpy, like, whan, like, I suffer, woe is me. This character doesn't automatically get you pressure. Couple him with the high pressure ADC, something that can build mannequins, something that has a lot of clear. So like Charybdis, Ishtar, Izanami, even if you just need a pressure bot, get him out of the like pre-level 3 phase, and this character literally just does everything you need for him and more. Like the character is just super stupid. Staying on the topic of peel supports, and in my opinion, the weakest of the peel supports besides Geb, because Geb's awful, is Kumakarna. Kumakarna is probably a solid A tier. It hurts my soul to put Kumakarna this high. As you guys know, for years I've hated this character. I still barely refuse to play this character because I do think there's just better options that are in my god pool. But he does a very similar job to Khepri. He does a very similar job to Ganesh and Aphrodite. Just a little bit easier to deal with. A lot of his abilities have some wind up. He's very easy to lock down as well. But for auto attack divers specifically, he jumps in priority to basically S tier. So if you know for a fact the enemy jungler prioritizes picks like Kali, Mercury, maybe I don't know, like Erlong Shen is another good one, I guess, as well. Maybe even Gilgamesh, stuff like that. Things that want to use like a lot of auto attacks to get in, like Osiris jungle, stuff like that. This character shuts them down in spades. A Mez into an orbit launch, into a root cripple will 9 times out of 10 kill characters that are diving like that. Khepri and Ganesh less so, can deal with those characters as well to a degree, but Kuma deals with specifically those characters better than both of those picks. Aphrodite deals with all of the picks that these 3 deal with and more. That's why she's probably the best support in the game right now. But yes, Kuma is still very solid. He can be very frustrating for for a lot of characters with like long channel times and windups, because he can just mess you out of it. So characters like Tiamat might struggle against him if he just gets in their face. But he is very easy to deal with, in my opinion. I do think that he's a lot easier to deal with than a character that can silence you and protection shred you, and a character that can revive himself or a teammate that's getting dove. And Aphrodite being Aphrodite, he is easier to deal with than those three characters. Is he easy to deal with? No, that's why he's still in A tier. Next is Kuzenbo. Kuzenbo, I think, is probably going to be a C tier pick in support specifically. I feel like he brings a lot of good disruption. He dives ADCs very, very well, but I feel like the thing that he does very well in the meta right now is not what you're drafting for. I feel like he leaves, like he can peel actually very decently. He has a lot of, maybe he's B tier. He's probably B tier actually. He has a really decent peel tool as well. Yeah, Serba better. Yeah, literally. It's like I think he's actually just better than Serb. That's why I think he can be in the same tier as Cerberus. Again, like I feel like you would rather see him in solo lane, but if you want to pick him early and flex him into support, it's still like completely viable to do that. And he doesn't get countered by the same thing Cerberus gets countered by. He doesn't have a channeled ability, so like stuns don't really shut him down very well. He wants to be in a lot of tick damage, and we're in like a very heavy tick damage meta right now with Tablet being built, ADCs not having super high damage builds, some junglers having some tick damage in their build as well. Like Crusher got buffs, and that just procs 2 as well. So he actually is a very, very decent pick. Nox is probably B tier, right along with Eset. She's probably better than Eset. I think Eset's probably the worst mage support in the game, but Nox does a lot of things that Ganesha does, just less. So the biggest thing here is that she has a big silence and she has a lot of lockdown. If you need to lock down a pick and you really don't care about lane pressure, because she can get it and she cannot, it just depends on the matchup. This character does that. She also reduces a lot of the damage on a dive target. So if you're worried about a solo laner with a lot of damage, so like let's say namely Cthulhu, if you Nox ult the Cthulhu, he's not a damage threat anymore, so your backline feels a lot more comfortable standing and fighting in their ground. Same thing with like maybe like Robin. If you can like silence the Robin in Forces 2, root a Robin Forces 2, then silence him. If Lancelot dives, he flanks behind you, just silence him so he can't leap off his horse, and then he's just dead. Nox has a lot of good tools to counter engage. Her weakest part is her pre-level 5 dual lane phase, and that's the biggest part of the game where she can end up getting ran over. If she gets ran over during that lane phase, then she's basically out of the game. And then at that point, you're wishing you had probably one of these other A or S tier picks. But if the lane phase goes fine, she can be a very good threat in the mid lane 3v3. Again, that ranged root, and then a jungler flanks behind. She does demand beads burn with their silence root combo as well. So if you have a jungler that has like a lot of like good CCs, like maybe Robin with blink, Hun Batch with an ultimate, stuff like that, has a lot of value. So don't take your eyes off Nox. I do think she fits into some comps. She's very, very like bottom 2 worthy. Especially if you think it's a really, like if it would have been a good Ganesh game, there's definitely a chance it's still a very good Nox game, for very similar reasons. Next is Sobek. Sobek's very solid. He's probably A tier. He just got buffed as well. Walls don't counter the Croc anymore. The biggest shutdown to the Crocodile in the past was walls. You would play picks like Yamoja. You would play picks like Kabrakan. And when the Cerberus engaged, you would beads and just wall him in and just kill him. And because he couldn't get out of it using his ultimate. But now his ultimate goes under player-made walls. So now that sense of lockdown isn't very doable. He also has a very good amount of chase down and a pretty decent beads burning tool with his pluck. So I feel like, again, if you ever wanted to lock in Athena, you would lock in Sobek before you lock in Athena. You're locking in Athena for a taunt, you're locking in Sobek for a pluck. Except Sobek gets infinitely tankier, and he probably won't die. He also has a really good chase down tool. He also has 2 abilities, using his ultimate and his tail whip, his 2. To help peel after he engages, something that Athena doesn't have. So again, he's just Athena, but infinitely better. And I do think he does have a very high pressure matchup into most of the supports. He can pressure Khepri very, very well. Khepri doesn't care if Khepri gets pressure, but if you wanted to play to roll over the dual lane and you wanted to try and like counterpick like Ganesha, Khepri, Aphrodite, this character can actually help you kind of deal with them during that lane phase, whether it's the mid lane 3v3 or the dual lane 2v2. So very, very solid pick. Keep an eye out for this character. Sylvanas is probably B tier, but like high B tier. This character does get kind of shadowed by everything in A tier. Bacchus wants to just pressure him. Fafnir wants to send him and lock him down for ganks. Kumba locks him down very well. Sobek destroys him. And all of these picks, again, I think are very, very good in Sylvanas. I think Afro outpressures Sylvanas and they match. Afro actually outsustains him. Ganesha, if Ganesha hits level 5 and hasn't died once in this lane, the second Ganesha puts up a cage, the tree is actually just dead. And again, if Khepri gets to level 5 without dying, which is very doable in that lane because he's Khepri, he can just end up like rooting and then like plucking the Sylvanas, and Sylvanas doesn't have his CC immune tool besides his ultimate, and he can't do that while Khepri's plucking him. So he does have pretty bad matchups, or at the best, he has net neutral matchups into all of the S tier characters. And he has pretty bad matchups into all the A tier characters here. And again, at best, net neutral matchups. So I don't think he can really be in the same tier as these characters because he doesn't deal with them very, very well. But he does deal with all of the characters in B tier and C tier very well. Again, Ares and Ardia want to cripple people, but Sylvanas is already immobile, so like that amount of lockdown doesn't do anything to him. He can... If Cabraca wants to sit on top of Sylvanas to try and kill him, Sylvanas can literally stand his ground and almost kill him back. It just depends on like the rest of your comp as well. Nox is pretty good into him. Isa's pretty good into him. But they also they don't threaten him enough to kill him. Horus has a decent matchup into him as well. And if you're playing just a pressure lane, that means you're just going to be on the back foot with Sylvanas. So don't sleep on Sylvanas. I do think he's better than Baron, Cerberus, Cthulhu, Athena, Geb. I do think he's better than those picks. But I don't think he's like super, super dominant. I think he's barely out of A tier. Next is Terra. Terra is an interesting case. This character was so good before they reverted the 9.6 changes where everyone, like now that everyone can die, this character's a lot worse. And I was off of the Terra train during that patch because I basically said, we were playing a lot of Thoth and stuff like that around that time, and I said, well, if my backline gets one shot, even when I press 4, it's not worth me having Terra when I could just have Ganesha, Khepri, Aphrodite. And then we still didn't play these characters nearly as much. We were still like leaning towards the Terra. But now again, like I feel like the meta's kind of settled where everyone can agree these characters keep your backline alive and they feel very, very good. Terra can do that for prolonged team fights. She has some very nasty pairings. If you can pair her with Cthulhu, which is almost permaban, pair her with the Hunbats, the team fight's basically an insta-win. Pair her with a tankier mid laner that's building tablets, so Tiamat's absolutely like a very, very good option for her. Tiamat can also proc her ultimate very well with her Tornado in her 1 and her 2. So she has some really good pairings. She slots very well into a lot of team comps. She's also very, very good into Bacchus, Fafnir, Kumbhakarna, and Sobek. She can get lane pressure into Ganesha and... Actually, not Ganesha. She can get lane pressure into Aphrodite and Khepri. Ganesha is probably one of her harder counter matchups in the game, and that feels really bad knowing that one of the best picks in the game also is one of her hardest counters. So if you're ever in a scenario where like maybe neither support's been locked in, but you can bottom 2 ban a Ganesha, and then you can end up taking Terra maybe from second pick, and you're getting the pick out of the second phase of bans. She's actually a very, very solid character. She brings a lot to a team. Even with the low pressure ADCs, she can end up giving them lane pressure. She has an insane team fight. She sieges very, very well, so she has a lot of good going for her. Next is Atlas. Atlas really can't be better than any of these picks, I think. I feel like I would prio Atlas more than a lot of these picks. That's because I'm an Atlas truther. He brings a lot of good lockdown, a lot of good lane pressure, a lot of good CC. He 2v2s extremely well. In fact, he makes a dual lane extremely deadly. And that's a thing that a lot of supports aren't doing right now. With a lot of like a lack of jungler presence in a dual lane, if the support can end up making that lane feel very volatile, very vulnerable, it feels very good because either the dual lane calls for help from their jungler, and then the solo lane gets pressure because your jungler's over there and their jungler's on you, and Atlas has enough safety to not die to ganks. So I do think that's actually a very, very good point of Atlas. It's just like in that early game, in that pre-level 5, he makes a dual lane very, very unsafe for the enemy. But after that, when he starts getting into like the mid lane 3v3, he can fall off a little bit. He has really good objective burn in the late game. He team fights very, very well, but he doesn't have a ton of that immediate peel. So there are some jungle matchups where he just doesn't feel very good into it. Lancelot is one. His only escape is a dash. And if Lancelot is in the game, he doesn't really lock down Lancelot very well at all. He doesn't lock down Charybdis at all, and Charybdis is a very, very strong matchup against him. Again, if you're aiming to pressure a dual lane, Charybdis just negates that because she's immune to his pull, she's immune to his dash, immune to his one. So Charybdis can just shut down what this character really wants to do. But if the enemy team is again prioritizing another pick, maybe they're prioritizing Hachimon or Xbalanque, and then you can end up third picking the Atlas. The Atlas can have a very, very good matchup in those picks, but there definitely would be better picks unless you're drafting something in the bottom two where you really want Atlas to couple with it. So just draft in mind where if you're taking Atlas, it's probably in your top three, probably your third pick, and then you need to probably ban some of his counters out as well. But he does have a lot of good team fight value. He's very, very healthy. He's a very hard target to kill if you play him right, and he can also aid you in just killing people that are diving. Next is Maui. Yeah, Maui's B tier, sadly. What can I say except get fucked? Maui is a character that I personally love playing. He's probably one of the more fun supports to play in the game. And you might look at Maui and say, oh, he has a good matchup in the Capri. He has a good matchup in the Aphrodite, Ganesha. He has a decent match in the Terra, which you're smoking crack if you think that, actually, by the way. But he has some decent matchups into some of these lower pressure, high priority appeal supports. And so if you counter draft with Maui and like a high pressure ADC to try and kill the support very, very early, and you send the jungler over to dual lane and you have a pretty low pressure silver lane, you can run over some of these higher pressure, higher priority support picks. But that's exactly it. He's a counter pick. You are locking this in with the idea of countering Aphrodite, Capri, or Ganesha, or Kumakarna. Stuff like that. Like you are locking him in with the sole purpose of saying, when my jungler gets over here, we are killing this target. In fact, I would almost 100% say you're never locking in Maui into Ganesha or into Aphrodite. You are locking in Maui to kill Capri. And if you fall into the we're like just gonna kill the Capri mindset, a Capri can literally just play completely bitch made, and then this pressure you'd be drafting for in this dual lane actually ends up not mattering. So then, like, sure, maybe the Capri loses his first buff rotation, but then he goes mid lane, and then you're a Maui in a mid lane 3v3 versus a Capri, a mage, and a jungler, and then he has a better mid 3v3 because he can revive someone that you're diving. So, like, realistically speaking, if the Capri plays better, like he just sacks his dual lane, like his lane phase, then you're just cooked. If you have a safe backline and you hit every ult, he's OP. Very, very true. I mean, if you have a backline like Charybdis, Yu Huang, and like they can't really get dove very, very well, and you can end up locking down Capri in the mid 3v3, again, that's a very good point in the game for you to play. But if the Capri realizes this and the Capri starts like roaming around, he's just not hanging around, that kind of stuff, when you start getting to the 5v5 part of the game, you'd infinitely rather have a Capri on your team than a Maui. So, like, me personally, like, if I was drafting this, like, there's other picks I would prio to counter the Capri than a Maui. But you could definitely look to just make sure he doesn't feel at home in duo, or he doesn't feel at home in mid lane either. And then if you want to force him to basically feel at home in solo side, then maybe you draft a solo laner that fucks him up. So, like, Shock would fuck up Capri. Amaterasu would kill Capri. Cthulhu doesn't really inherently kill Capri, but it can help kill the Capri for sure. So it just really depends. I mean, like there's definitely some strategies where you can end up just forcing Capri into just not feeling at home anywhere. And then he feels really, really bad until like the 25-30 minute mark. So, but yeah. I mean, Maui isn't a bad pick. He does get lane pressure. But if any of the good picks above him know how to play into that pressure, he falls off a cliff. So, if you're as an example, if I'm locking in this pick against someone that doesn't play Capri a ton, I'm going to use Benson as a GOAT. Benson's my GOAT, but he doesn't play Capri a ton. So if his team forces him on Capri to take it away from me, I would lock in Maui and say, okay, I'm just going to farm you. Like, I'm just going to run at you. So, stuff like that. Next is going to be Karen. Karen is, Karen's pretty bad. I'm going to be very honest. This character on release was so good because he was a damage threat by himself. With Prophetic, with Thebes, and with like Chronos Pendant or Glad Shield, he could end up just doing really solid damage, very, very solid poke. But now, like, because they've nerfed him out of mid lane, so his damage is lower. His CC is still the same, but it's not great CC. This character gets countered by a relic. If you have Sprout, you can shut down his boat dive, which is hilarious. And so the only tool he has at that point is a range silence, a bit of shielding that did get nerfed, that reveals enemies, so he can counter invis, I guess. That's actually pretty nice. Or the tidal wave, and you can play around the tidal wave pretty easily, at least in my opinion. He's very good for an all-in dive comp, and you're rolling over their peel. I guess it's actually really good if you want to like try and like lock down a Capri and like the Karen's the thing locking down Capri from a range, and then your backline are both diving. Like you have like an Apollo ADC and then like a Tiamat mid, and like they're leaping in on the dive, and it's just an all in like hey, we dive them harder kind of comp. But I feel like that, I mean, I don't even think that kills anything anymore. Like I feel like the supports here, like again, like Ganesh would cage, and then he'd wait to silence till he gets tidal wave. Then he silences whoever's in for the dive, and then you have a 115% like prot swing. Like it's awful. So like, and Aphrodite negates that dive entirely. So like, I guess if they're not like I guess like Capri's the only thing that maybe struggles against an all-in dive like that. Like you're literally like 5 divers. But even then, like if you play it right, Capri doesn't even struggle like that much into it either. So I feel like he doesn't do enough. I feel like that playstyle, like other things would need to be very good in the meta to bring him into the meta. Like he would never be the integral piece of a strategy like that. Yemoja. Yemoja is very solid. Yemoja brings a lot to the table. She brings walls, namely. She is the best wall support in the game. Kabrakan has walls, and that's a big part of his viability. Yemoja brings sustain. She can bring lane pressure if you know how to play the pick correctly. And without her even ulting, she brings a threat of her ulting. You can't really play beacons the way you want to with Yemoja in the game if you're playing against her. You need to rush Phantom Shell, or else you might just lose an early game teamfight that can snowball the game out of control. This character does have some pretty bad matchups, though. Into Ganesha, into Aphrodite, she doesn't do a ton. She is actually really useful into Capri to help lock him down. But if the Capri goes Sprint and Shell, then she really doesn't do too much in that matchup either. She gets countered by things such as a Willix. So like there's a jungle pick that you can end up bottom 2ing into Yemoja. And it also like if they have a good Willix player, it forces you to ban a Willix because her Riptides are just like that. Like if you end up Riptiding in a fight and a Willix ults him away, like ults him back into the backline, then your Yemoja is just a troll pick. So like you really feel like you're not top 3 banning a Willix at this point. And if you are, then you're trolling your draft because that means you've given up something else very, very strong. But don't take it personally. Like don't get it twisted. She still has a really good matchup into like a lot of the meta picks right now. She is really decent into Aphrodite to help lock her down. Same thing with Capri. She forces that relic. A lot of the A tier picks, again, Terra she's actually really good against. Fafnir she's really good against as well. Anything under her struggles into her in like into a direct matchup. Things like Lancelot that are very, very meta right now struggle into Yemoja. Whether they are trying to get away from her ultimate or they're just diving and she's pressing 2. They struggle. Like a lot of those dive picks struggle right now into her. But there are things you can draft into a Yemoja if she ends up getting top picked or even bottom 2'd, where you feel happy playing into her. Next is going to be Yimmer. We just talked about walls a little bit. Yimmer, oh wait, whoa, I'm moving Bakugo here. My fault. Yimmer is probably a counter pick. I think he has good matchups into, again, like namely like Lancelot, Pele, things that want to try and dash. He can end up walling off supports that don't end up getting away from him very easily. So things like Sylvanas, things like Atlas, things that would want to be face checking, things like, again, Kuzumo can get walled off, Isak can get walled off, Horus, Cab, Artio, Ares, all of these things. He has a really good matchup into all of these picks. So fuck, maybe he's A tier. No, I still think he's B tier because everything in A tier, like I would lock it into Yimmer and be like, oh, like let's just kill Yimmer. So, like, B is situational, and if they're locking one of these situational picks, it's the situation then becomes a Yimmer situation basically. Again, Yimmer locks in Ares. If Ares ever wants to blink and ult, just wall off the Ares. If Artio steps up, Freezer, Waller, she probably dies. Kabrakan steps up, freeze, wall, he's dead. Horus dashes in, fucking wall him off, you know? So, 30-minute timer, low key. If the game goes post 30 minutes, the Yimmer's actually fried. Like, because then the Yimmer can't do what he wants. So, I do think though he has a really good matchup into all of these picks. Once they get six slotted, he's dead exactly. So, I do think the wall is a very, very powerful tool in the mid game specifically. They can't base check objectives the way they really want to. You can end up playing a pretty decent burn comp, have Yimmer be your support that's just on the point, and then if they step up, you wall in the person that stepped up and kill them, and then go back to doing the objective. Because that wall lasts way too long. So, but I do think he's decent. I do think he's really, really good into all of the B tier picks as well. But into some of the into the S tier and A tier, he's gonna struggle for sure. I'm never playing Jing Qian. However, there are situations where you want Jing Qian. I think I'll put him in B. I do think he's situational. Lane pressure, yes. Beads burn, yes. Good setup in CC for a mid 3v3, yes, of course. He doesn't do anything into the S tier picks. He doesn't do anything in the Khepri. If the Khepri's bad, then he actually does a lot in the Khepri. If he blinks and goes onto the Khepri, and Khepri doesn't go like Beads, Absolution, Magi, something like that, then the Khepri is probably dead. Stuff like that. So he has a really good matchup in the Khepri, but into Ganesha, he can't get anything done in like during lane. He actually is useless in Aphrodite. He actually does nothing in Aphrodite. And if they're banning Aphrodite, then maybe they play for a Jing Qian. But then, like, there's other things, like, even in B tier, like, Nox can shut down Jing Qian. Very, very heavy. Yamoja has a really good matchup in the Jing Qian. Fafnir does really well in the Jing Qian. Terra does very well in the Jing Qian. Because, like, she'll, like, go around the circle for a while, but then she won't get thrown, which is very funny. And that gives her a chance to either, like, she has Absolution for her ultimate, as well. She's an Absolution character, counters him very, very well. Same thing with Bacchus, he's an Absolution character. So, like, the things that he wants to do, he doesn't really do it very well into the A tier and the S tier picks. But again, like situationally, like if you can draft a comp that's really good into Khepri, and he can actually slot in that in the bottom two very, very well, at least in my opinion. So Hercules is worse Horus. So he has insane lane pressure. You have to be able to hit your combo. He groups up the wave very well for your ADC to clear it all on wave 1. So if you 2 the wave and then you walk at the ADC and dash them, then you've won lane clear at that point. He brings similar pressure early waves like to Terra, similar Terra pressure. Doesn't get countered as heavily by Ares and Artio, but very well still can get countered. He has CC immunity to deal with the Ares though, same thing with the Artio. Can pluck her, and then he doesn't care about dashing, he just cares about plucking her. So into the things like, let's say you're a Horus prioritizer, and then they counterpick the Ares or Artio first, like let's say they draft this first. You could go Hercules, and then you're accomplishing a very similar goal. And if you're a Horus player that doesn't play using Horus's ultimate, then Hercules is actually just better Horus for you. Because you actually get an ultimate that does things. Whether it gives you just blanket CC immunity or a decent amount of like team fight damage, this character just does more for you. So definitely don't sleep on the Horus. Or the Hercules. I think they're actually very, very viable right now. But they do have really bad matchups. Again, if the Khepri's bad, Hercules can fuck up Khepri, like levels like 1, 2, 3. Like, if Khepri gets plucked and then dashed on, and then you have an ADC that has like a lot of pressure, so like Ishtar, Don Zaburo, Hachimon even with his dash stun, you can make this Khepri straight up miserable. Like you can make him really just regret locking the pick. But Aphrodite doesn't really care about Hercules like too much, as long as she doesn't int the early lane away. Basically, if you're just better than the other support and you want them to int the early lane away, try locking in Hercules. Maybe you win the game instantly. Odin. Odin is strictly a counter pick for me. He's going to be in the same tier. I would be locking in Baron, Cerberus at this point as well. If I'm ever locking this pick in a draft, it's going to my solo laner. Because Odin doesn't really give me lane pressure the way I want it to. And okay, like if I'm looking for a good cage, who's peeling for my backline? Like stuff like those are the questions I'd be asking myself. I would much rather just be on a B tier pick or even an A tier pick, let alone the S tier picks, than an Odin for sure. Let's see. Now we get to some of the like very specific things. So Naja, Fenrir, and Serket are probably all going to be counter picks. So, like, again, like, Naja for sure. The website's lagging, that's okay. Yeah, Naja, Fenrir, Serket. So, Naja, Fenrir are probably going to be picked in the same situation for me. If we need a stun and we also want some kind of kill pressure, but we're also playing the gank duo, then maybe I'm planning to play one of either Naja or Fenrir in support. So, like, if we know their jungler plays duo side, and that's just how that's just the way they want to play. Let's say they go Lancelot, I'd be drafting Naja Fenrir, because then at that point we're aiming to kill the jungler. So again, Fenrir has an at-will stun. Same thing with Naja. Both burn beads with their ultimates very, very well. Naja trades a lot of lane pressure with some of the lower pressure picks, some of the S tier picks, so he actually doesn't feel too bad into Ganesha. He doesn't do anything in Aphrodite, but into Khepri feels also very, very well. Feels pretty good. Same thing with Fenrir. So, like, it's a very specific, like, these, like, so Khepri got drafted. So did Ganesha probably. What else got drafted around them? Could you drag the jungler over to duo lane and fight around the peel support? And then if you could, do you get a kill? If you do, then you're locking in Naja or Fenrir. Serket is very weird. I've never been much of a Serket support fan, even back when she was like a mainstay support. I prioritize the other assassin supports over her every day of the week. I think now, though, tanky support Serket could be decent. Also, let me just mute my Discord for a second. So, congratulations to the goons in Discord. You've made it into a YouTube video. Anyway. But yeah, no. So yeah, like Serket, I mean, she has some lockdown with her ultimate, with her taunt. She can have a bit of a damage start onto a frontliner. I think if you are stepping up, again, like if you're a bad Khepri player and Serket is there like to lock you down and you're just getting killed on cooldown, the pick can feel very, very good. I feel like she's doing similar things to Athena. Sadly, I'd still prefer the Serket over the Athena because her engage is not nearly as telegraphed. But yeah, like I think you're playing a pick comp. You're trying to pick off a frontliner, whether it's the jungler or the support. The solo laner isn't your pick target, and I feel like that's like the way you're playing the game. If you're locking in any of the assassin supports, Achilles is a high pressure counter pick. This pick obviously is good into Khepri because he has an execute, and this would be like, Khepri doesn't care if you draft executes if you're a good Khepri player because you're taking away a good solo pick and you're taking away a good jungle pick. As in, like, if they want to go Achilles or they want to go Thanatos or Ao Kuang's like the worst out of the three, by the way, then they're either taking a magical jungler, they're getting a low pressure matchup into solo lane, into what's meta right now, or they're locking in Thanatos. So the only spot where you would be getting an execute reliably would be Achilles. Achilles gets pressure in the Khepri matchup. He has an execute for the Khepri matchup. If you don't need a jungler to play through your lane to get pressure either. So if you get a high pressure ADC and Achilles, you just keep poking. You keep putting that poke onto the Khepri. You just make sure you're out lane clearing them, and then the second you have level 5, you run at somebody. Realistically, you want to run at the Khepri because if he aims to revive the ADC who either has a dash or a relic up like Aegis or something like that, Aegis or beads, Khepri's not gonna have Aegis. So realistically speaking, you can just end up just shoving a lot of pressure down the Khepri's throat, which is a matchup that he ends up playing that way sometimes anyway. But if the Khepri steps up one time when he's level 5, like while you're level 5, you just burn a bunch of damage and ultimate into the Khepri, and you double the Khepri. And you can just end up executing him, and then the ADC loses lane pressure that way. So it feels really, really good that way. Sobek and Smitsu, though, with the Sobexecute, exactly. Listen, if Sobexecute is a thing, then Sobek will be pretty good in the Khepri. Khepri will lose a lot of priority there. So, but in Smite 1, without the Sobexecute, Sobek's strictly down here. So, and then Guan Yu. Guan Yu is probably a matchup that you are not playing into Ganesha. You could play it into Khepri. Again, you have Prot Shred. You don't have the execute kill threat because maybe they banned it. Maybe you played Achilles support game 1. into their Khepri, and they are still sticking with the Khepri. They thought the Achilles was the problem. Guan Yu is, in fact, an option you can go to. Protection Shred onto a guy that grants protections for the lane. Very, very good. For him to interrupt your clear, he needs to pluck you. And that feels really bad for a Khepri, because this Khepri could pluck you and insta-cancel it, and then, okay, now the Guan Yu's lane clear and lane pressure's down, so is the Khepri's. So then it's down to straight up a pressure matchup based on ADCs. Which you don't really mind that too much. You're basically coasting until level 5, because at level 5, if the Khepri dashes you to interrupt your ability, then you just all in the Khepri. You can go horrific in this case, which means the Khepri needs to be going sprint first, which means they don't have shell to shell bait you. It's definitely a playable matchup. Late game, it feels decent. However, you would be part of the dive, so you would need a backline that doesn't care if they don't have an insane amount of peel. You want to be trying to snowball the match. Again, you're just making Khepri feel very uncomfortable, whether you're playing BDK, stuff like that. But Guan Yu, again, has less of a place in the support role than the Achilles in that matchup specifically. But one matchup he does actually fare better than Achilles is the Aphrodite matchup. So he does end up running Aphrodite down. One of the best ways to deal with Aphrodite is just to run her down. He doesn't care a lot about her ultimate, because his ultimate lasts forever. It lasts infinitely longer. And if she's Afro-ulting your Guan Yu stun, it means that something else, maybe like a jungler CC, wasn't immune or is not being immune strictly after. So this character can actually end up getting walked down very, very well by Guan Yu if the Guan Yu players knows what they're doing. But she does have a stun to cancel out his Tao Lao Assault. Does actually end up playing lane pressure on him pretty well. So that's just like, you can play that matchup, but realistically you're locking in these picks in a Khepri. It's basically what you're doing. I think that's it. That's all I'd probably be locking in comp. I'll talk about Bake Kujira for like 2 seconds. This character is horribly designed. His time dilation doesn't last long enough anymore. His damage numbers aren't high enough to threaten a backliner, so like the ADC for lane phase. He doesn't get enough protections on his 2 or his 1 anymore. The damage reduction's not enough. So he's a tank that wants to just be like in the middle of a team fight to time dilate everything. And then like if you combo his time dilation with a knockup, then it feels very, very good. So like back when this character first came out, Vamana was meta, so you would like Bake blink ult, and then Vamana would dash through the backline because they don't want to beads Vamana dash, and then they'd be knocked up for like 12,000 years, and then like the Bake ult suddenly is like now like one of the best CCs in the game. I raise you, just play Oleron. Like literally just play Oleron instead of like playing for this guy's CC. He doesn't win lane pressure anymore. He doesn't CC well in a team fight. He doesn't peel very well. All of his relic usage doesn't feel great either. Like, he just doesn't do anything. He's probably the worst mistake in Smite history because he was OP and then he was awful. Other than that, like, he might be viable in solo lane if the enemy solo laner is bad. Wait, I just realized, where's Cupid? Fuck. Wait a minute. Oh, I dragged Dodgy. Dodgy, you're back down here somewhere. The website's like starting to crash. It's okay. Cupid is SSSSS tier. He's better. He kills Khepri in the lane matchup. You can't silence auto attacks on Ganesha. And oh wait, guess what? If we're Afro ulting the Cupid ult, GG. Like now my dive is going crazy. The slow cripple needs to be immune. So no, listen. If I had a list of like the top tier fun supports, Cupid's up there for sure. Otherwise, Cupid's not getting locked in. Hearts, pick him up. Yeah, is he not just Yemo? He might be Yemo, but with auto attacks that are just better. Yeah, stun, healing, movement speed on the 3. Like, fuck, wait, maybe he is just Yemoja. Wait, maybe Cupid and Yemoja are the same character, guys. Fuck. He can heal more, too, like, during lane phase. He has a more reliable stun. Fuck, wait a minute. Okay. This needs to be scrimmed. I'll get back to you guys. On that one. But, yeah, it needs to be scrimmed. Hearts, pick him up. But yeah, I think I'm locking this in. I think, and I do like for S tier to have like 3 to 4 characters in it. I think Aphrodite is probably just the best support in the game right now. And very closely behind her is Khepri. So like this S tier is now in order. So you have Aphrodite, who does everything you need except burn objectives, but she makes diving a single target literally impossible. And in a meta where we're building breastplate tablet mid laners, making the ADC unkillable to the shock or like the soul laner in general that's going to be diving them, like the soul laner no longer has a target, and that basically invalidates an entire role of characters. And this character being in the game, she doesn't get countered by anti-heal anymore. That's a myth. That's fake. She doesn't get countered by Odin either, because Odin has bad matchups into the things that you'd rather be picking. So if you top pick Aphrodite and they lock in Odin, sweet, you get an insanely meta solo laner that's diving their backline faster than what they're killing your backline with. Afro might die at some point, but at the point Afro's dead, their entire backline's dead. It's like she stalls way too long on dive like that. So like you can't even counter her that way. Same thing with Khepri. Basically, by the time that you've dove like the backline effectively, maybe you killed the Khepri, maybe you killed the backline like as well that he was like saving, but your backline's dead. Same thing with Ganesha, except Ganesha probably helped the dive with the cage, and then maybe the backline never died. It's just that he has like slightly worse mid game matchups. So these characters are actually just insanely broken. They're insanely OP. They make engaging way too hard for the enemy. They make counter engaging way too easy for your team. These characters all do something very, very similar, except Bacchus. Bacchus is just like one of the best support engages in the game, and he has so much like lane pressure in the early game, even into the best matchups. So he's just like overall just very, very still good. B tier, depending on the comp that's been locked to deal with these support picks, or with these support picks in mind, these picks are very, very viable into countering the S tier, and in some scenarios the A tier as well. C tier are strict counter picks, as in you've seen the support pick in like the top 3. The B tier picks maybe got banned, or you don't want to play them for some reason or another, and these picks are hard counter picks. As in like Yomoji got locked in, you're counter picking with Baron. Afro got locked in, you're counter picking with Baron or like Serket as a great example. Khepri got locked in, all these things got banned, you're locking in Achilles support, and you top 3'd it to to fucking switcheroo them in bans, stuff like that. C tier, again, just strict counter picks. D tier, in my opinion, you never have a reason to lock these picks in, because they would have to ban all of the S tier picks, all of the A tier picks, and all of the B tier picks that do the job that these D tier picks are doing. Or the job that these picks are doing are not valued in the meta, as in Charon. The job he's fulfilling right now is just not very valuable in the meta right now, which is just all-in dive. And then you have Bake Kujira, which is a smite mistake. So, if you guys agree with that list, awesome. It means you're thinking the same way I'm thinking. If you don't agree with the list, too bad. I'm right. Just kidding. If you have an argument for it, just again argue in the comments. It is what it is. But I'm pretty sure this is just definitive. I'm not gonna lie. So, this is what I would bet. This is what I'd be prioritizing in competitive right now. If you would prioritize something different, let me know below. Otherwise, thank you guys for tuning in. But when I told you Geb is fun, you are wrong. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. I'll catch you guys all in the next one. Peace, love, and healing. Hearts, pick them up.